the zone of proximal development, scaffolding, social constructivism, the roles that language and culture play in learning and development. Lev Vygotsky built upon Jean Piaget's theories of cognitive development to bring us ideas about learning that have greatly influenced the field of early childhood education. So, what would Vygotsky have to say about practices that are prominent today in nature-based preschools? Hello, I am Nicole Dravillas-Frabel, and this is Wildwood Teaching. A few weeks ago, I looked at nature preschools through the lens of what would Jean Piaget say. Today, I want to look at another influencer in the field of education, and I want to look at what would Vygotsky say about nature-based education and outdoor preschools. Now, Vygotsky was interested in the field because of Piaget. And he started out by examining Piaget's theories and then introduced a few new concepts of his own. So a key concept with Vygotsky is the role that language and culture play in shaping development and learning. So in other words, a child's environment isn't just the stuff that's there. It also includes the people, the lens through which that environment is either viewed by the child or is introduced to the child by society. And so I always look at this and how this relates to nature preschool is I look at Richard Louv and his role in nature deficit disorder. Now, when Louv originally coined this term, nature deficit disorder, this was because he was interviewing children in the late 90s in the United States. And what he was finding is that children had a tremendous amount of anxiety and concern for the natural world, right? They knew about the hole in the ozone layer, as we talked about it then. They knew about pollution. They knew about melting polar ice caps. They knew about species extinction or impending extinction. But at the same time that children had this anxiety and concern about the natural world, they also had a tremendous fear of it. The risk of being outside, right? We might fall down. We might get hurt. We might get lost. We might get stolen, right? Stranger danger. So there's this disconnect because the only way that children are viewing nature is through this adult lens, through the lens that society had at the time and honestly still has, right? As something other and something we should be concerned about, as something that's disappearing, but something through which we personally have no connection because we are not ourselves spending time outside. And so this was the term nature deficit disorder. It was never meant to be like a medical disorder term, but more to highlight this disconnect between what children are getting from society and never having those experiences or positive experiences even mediated by adults. And Vygotsky really understood the critical importance of these social interactions and how they shape development, right? Children construct knowledge through watching, experiencing, and receiving feedback from other humans. And those other humans could be teachers, they could be parents, they could be any adults, they could be peers. Who's in your social group? And so unlike Piaget's more rigid stage theory, right? This comes first, then this, then this, and if we don't have this, we can't have this later in the stage. Vygotsky believed that learning happens in little spurts, based again on what is relevant to the child, and that you can have growth in one area with or without growth in what might be a corresponding area in that particular stage of development, and that you can go up and down through the stages depending on what your relevant experiences are at the time. And his main contribution, right, is that zone of proximal development, that the optimal environment, and remember, environment includes everything, right? It includes the physical stuff as well as the other people, as well as your own lens, right? The optimal environment is that sweet spot that happens between where a child is doing just enough challenge to keep it interesting, to push that growth, but not so far above where the child is that they become frustrated and just walk away, right? That's the zone of proximal development. And now the teacher's role is to find that sweet spot and offer the scaffolding. And it is important to note that scaffolding is coaching, right? It's that little step up. If you're trying to get from here to here and that's too big of a gap, my role as a teacher is to bridge that gap with a little step. It's not to tell you what's over there. It's not to give you the answer. It's to help you get to your own answer. And peers can provide that scaffolding as well. And the best example that I have of this is a few winters ago, I had a child who was attempting to climb, I'm going to call it a broken tree. So above my head, so let's say 6 or 7 feet, the tree had broken off. And so it left a nice tall stump. And there was a child that I watched him and kind of, put a hand somewhere on the stump, put another hand up, put his foot up, and slide back down. And, he kept trying it. He kept sliding back down. I wasn't the only one watching him. There was an older child. We have a multi-age group here at Wildwood Nature School. There was an older child who was also watching him. And she walked over and she said, "Are you trying to climb the stump?" And the child said, "Yes." And she said, "Here, I'll show you how to do it." And so she not only showed him, but as she was moving, talked through her process. She said, "Look, I'm going to put my foot right here. There's a little, hole in the tree." It was like a little divot, a little indentation, a little hole in the tree, and it fits my foot. And so I put my foot right there so it doesn't slide. And then I'm going to put my hand here and I'm going to pull up just a little bit. And then I'm going to put my other foot on. And then I'm going to move my hands. And then I'm going to move one foot. And then just slightly higher, and I'm going to find another hole. And then I'm going to move my hands. And then when I get to the very top, I'm going to pull. And then she jumped off and she said, "Now, do you know where to put your foot?" And he said, "Yes." And so he was watching the whole time and he put his foot exactly where that other child had shown him. And he got up a little bit and a little bit more, and then he slid back down, right? And then he tried again, right? And now he looks over at me because I've been watching the whole time, mostly for safety. And he said, I, I can't do it. Can you put me up on the step?" And I said, "I can't put you up the top, but I'm watching you. And I've noticed that each time you try, you're getting up higher and higher. So I know if you keep trying, I know you're going to get to the top. And it's okay because I'm here, I'm watching you, I'm going to catch you if you fall. So don't worry about that piece of it. Just worry about where you're going to put your hands. And really, it took him another 15 minutes and he got up to the top. And his face, when he got up to the top, was just beaming, right? He did it all on his own power. And so not only did he accomplish that one task with the scaffolding that was in his zone of proximal development, he got a message for his future struggles. I can hit that zone, right? And I can go past it. And I can ask people, my friends, my teachers, for assistance, but I don't have to have them do it for me because I've got it in myself. And this is where I think that nature-based education really aligns with Vygotsky, because it's in our embrace of that challenge and risk, because the zone of proximal development cannot happen in the comfort zone. It cannot happen if we're in that safe bubble of a classroom where there are no rough edges. It can't happen if everything is the same and predictable every day, right? If I've got the same blocks and the same art materials every day, and the physical layout of my classroom never changes. The beauty is, now I could do this in a traditional classroom, right? I can think of something new every day for my art center. I can bring in new blocks every day. I could just one day go in and confuse the children by switching up everything in the classroom, right? The chair's now over here. The blocks corner is the opposite part of the room. But I don't have to do this in a natural environment because it is constantly changing for me. Now, that could be due to just the weather, right? It's cold today. It'll be warm tomorrow. It might be raining tomorrow. Or it could be the after effects of the weather. Sometimes we go into the forest and we have a tree now blocking our path because the wind knocked it down during the storm, right? Or maybe while we were gone, somebody else, whether those are animals or other humans, have interacted with the environment and changed it somehow, left their mark on it, right? So children are encountering challenges without my having to do it. Now I can, right? I can notice what the children are into, and I can bring in new items to that environment, whether it's a literal new environment, right? A new lens through which they can view things. I could bring binoculars, magnifying glasses, or it can be figuratively, right? I could ask open-ended questions. I could bring in a field guide and put in a suggestion that we look for something. Or I could suggest something. Would we like to build a literal bridge today? Would we like to build a dam? And what are the learning processes that we're going to go through? But because the environment is not all on me, I get to concentrate more on creating the scaffolding, on creating those new opportunities for children. So let's get the children outside. If not, let's bring new nature into them. Give them the gift of social constructivism in an environment that is going to provide challenges that they can discover on their own. Because when they discover them on their own, that is most likely to be within their zone of proximal development. And if you are ready to do this, then I am going to encourage you to tap into one of the 10 for 10 trainings, 10 trainings, each offered at $10 a piece on very small, discrete things that you can change. You get to decide, do I want to start a school garden this year? Do I want to activate learning while hiking or walking with children? Do I want to introduce sit spots? Pick the training that matches what you want to do. They are designed to be simple, minimal materials that you can watch the half-hour training and then the very next day implement it into your preschool practice. Um, Take a look at that. And then be sure to join me here next week when I will be focused on how nature can reduce three of the most common triggers to challenging behavior. I will see you there.